Hi, everyone, and welcome to VMware's multi-cloud podcast. A live streaming series. Um, we try to come to you every Tuesday and every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific, and that's our plan for most of July. With me is my co-host Lauren Vandervar, and with us is our guest Kenny Coleman. Lauren, you want to introduce yourself? Just say hi.
Hey everyone, excited to be here and to have Kenny with us. As David said, we're aiming to have these every Tuesday and Thursday, so excited to feature new speakers and solutions from the VMware portfolio.
And Kenny's back with us. Kenny was our first guest back in June, and we brought him back to talk about a slightly different topic. Kenny will introduce himself and tell us what he's going to be talking about today.
Well, I kind of want to know, am I the first repeat?
You're the first repeat, and you were just an awesome first guest. So we loved having you. We wanted to bring you back to talk about a different topic. This month we're focusing on management, cloud management, and various technologies in VMware's portfolio. And Kenny, we wanted to have you back to talk about some of the things that are happening with Tanzu in the area of management around Kubernetes. You want to just introduce yourself again and tell us what you're going to talk about today?
Sure, David. I'll go through a quick little introduction. I remember last time I talked, and I think the introduction lasted like 5 minutes. So we're just gonna do like the 10-second version here. So I am a senior technical marketing manager at VMware, focused on all things in the Tanzu run category with Tanzu Basic and Tanzu Standard editions. So there's a lot of different products that kind of fold into these editions, and I am one of the go-to people for helping spread the gospel and good information that is coming with a lot of these products as well. And I guess to kind of talk about what we're going to be talking about today is, let's see, 8 days into July, and you're already going over cloud management. And so we're going to hit Tanzu Mission Control today. So that's really what we're going to be talking about, global or fleet-wide management of all of your Kubernetes clusters that either are running in your own data center, running on vSphere or any other type of platform, whether you're running Rancher or OpenShift or anything like that, or whether you're running it across clouds in Azure, GKE, AKS, Amazon. I mean, you name it, we'll show you how to be able to manage it all.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Cool. So I'll just take it from there. Let me go ahead and say the old words everybody always says, let me share my screen here. So making sure that, let's see, pull that up. Cool. All right. So y'all can see that. So I'm going to have to like take this screen off and like bring up my PowerPoint so I can see and move the slides. So if by some chance there's some comments or questions or anything, feel free to just interrupt me and I will go ahead and try to answer them as best as possible. So we are going to be talking about how to manage Kubernetes across clouds. And this is just kind of a few slides to sort of set context, show you the architecture, as well as some of the features that are baked into Tanzu Mission Control as well. But before we just talk about Tanzu Mission Control, it's really hard to really set the scene of why we're here or why we're talking about it, is because of just the growth of Kubernetes. The growth of cloud native applications is going to significantly increase over a vast majority of time. And this stat says that 85% of organizations will be running in containers by 2025. However, there's another already differing study that came out that says that there's already 94% of organizations that are having trouble of running Kubernetes. And I think there's around like 85% that are running either in production or pre-production. And I kind of found these articles pretty recently because I was trying to figure out like, well, what are the big prohibitors or inhibitors to actually taking Kubernetes in production? So you can read what these all are down here, and we take care of a lot of these issues in the Tanzu Edition portfolio. But the one that is second to the bottom there, where it says cross-platform management and monitoring, that's really what we're going to look in today about what you get with Tanzu Mission Control. Now, Tanzu Mission Control also takes care of a few different things that we'll see in regards of security. It also does scaling. It can help your budgetary resources by making sure that you have one single, I do not want to say it. I'm going to make sure I don't say pane of glass, but one single management interface for just your Kubernetes environments. I think that a lot of us in the IT world have gotten burnt out by the idea of hearing that whole single pane of glass construct for a while now. So I'm not going to refer to it as that, but it is another pane of glass, I guess you could say that if you will. And so really
Yeah,
what we
nice
do with
job
Tanzu,
avoiding that one pane of glass.
I know. It's just one of those things. It's like you hear it and you're just like, oh gosh, here we go again, right? I mean, like it's something that's like been beaten so far down
Yeah.
for a lot of us for a while, and so I kind of just look at it as like, okay, it's another pane of glass, but it's a good pane of glass.
Yeah,
Let's
and
put
it's
it that way.
appropriate for the user, right? Because that's the problem with one pane of glass, which is like, well, not everybody wants to see the same thing.
For sure. Yeah, I guess, and it does depends on your context. It depends on what you're in charge of. So yeah, if you're a vSphere admin, you probably don't care too much about Tanzu Mission Control. But if you are a Kubernetes operator, or if you're now the vSphere admin that is becoming the Kubernetes
Yep,
operator, then you are going to start caring about it.
there you go.
So the Tanzu standard, mission, I guess you could say, to look at this, or like really the way that it's set out to really accomplish, is that it takes everything that we've talked about in the last time we came in here talking about Tanzu Basic, and with Tanzu Kubernetes Grid being able to have complete cluster lifecycle management, extension support, and all this other kind of stuff. But now kind of build that up another level and take it across different clouds. So we're going to be realizing the benefit of running Kubernetes in any cloud, and you can operate all these clusters effectively the same exact way by being able to apply policies, setting backup and retention policies into them as well. And so we'll kind of see what that looks like too. And this is the same slide that I showed last time. So in Tanzu Basic, you kind of have what is core and necessary to get started in creating a production-ready Kubernetes cluster. Again, but when you're looking at this, you are operating and managing it as a single site, or operating and management as what can the management cluster take care of in regard to Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. Whereas when we look at Tanzu Standard, and you might have multiple vSphere environments, you might be in an environment where you've got Robo, you've got massive data center. And so there's no such thing as one vCenter for you. Instead, you might have 14. This is the ability where you can start scaling to the point of actually having a visual representation of all your Kubernetes clusters in one point. But it does more than just that when we get to Tanzu Standard. And I'm not going to talk about Ingress. That's as a part of just the package in general. But we look at this global control plane on top, where we look at policy management, reporting for conformance, observability, and some monitoring that happens. You can kind of see some health and some statistics of the cluster. And of course, again, backup and restoration. And that's all taken care of by another open source project called Valero that is built into this as well. And this is, again, kind of the slide where a lot of people like to look and say, okay, what are the actual technical components that come into it? But I'll let you go and read about that some other time. But I do want to touch on just some things with Tanzu Mission Control, again, to set a little bit of context before we go and dive into the UI. So with Tanzu Mission Control, here's just a very simplified architecture of it. So as a user, we kind of start at the very bottom and work our way up. So we have the ability to bring in clusters from any type of infrastructure provider. However, we have the ability to attach and manage clusters and be able to apply policies, put them into any kind of resource groups or anything like that. But there's only a few platforms today, and that's notably vSphere, AWS, and Azure, where we can also perform all of the lifecycle management capabilities through Tanzu Mission Control as well. TKG, as we talked about last time, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, that does provide us the engine for creating this lifecycle management piece, where you can just go ahead and upgrade things through, or upgrade your clusters through a Tanzu CLI, or just through the kubectl plugin. But now we can do it through a graphical user interface. And I think that's also another big key here, is that this is one of the only components in the Tanzu editions. And when you talk about standard and basic, this is one of the only ones that actually has a graphical user interface. And that's because this is really meant to be this sort of gateway into the whole Tanzu portfolio. And maybe I'm dropping breadcrumbs for future things, but just kind of take that for what it is there.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, right? I think we've gotten very comfortable and used to the idea that everything is available at the API level, but there are some times when it just is helpful to be able to do things through a graphical interface, right? Especially when you're talking about managing and things like that.
Oh, of course. I mean, going back to my old admin days, I still prefer UI. Don't be wrong. I can still, navigate my way around a CLI or anything like that. But if I just want to see something real quick, or I want to put a dashboard up, I'm not going to sit there and look at a terminal interface. I'd rather just sort of see what's happening and click around. It's just one of those things. It's ease of use on the operator at the end of the day. Again, this is just more kind of like building blocks of Tanzu Mission Control. So we kind of talked about some of the individual aspects that are, or facets, as you could say, that are included as a part of it. And we'll dive deeper into these when we get into the demo. And lastly, when we talk about TMC, and of course, that's the short-term terminology here for Tanzu Mission Control, is that we look at it as a global control plane. Instead, what we're able to do is we're being able to inherit what we call TKG management clusters, and that will provide us the ability to, one, take care of lifecycle management, but two, we can also now provision Kubernetes clusters from Tanzu Mission Control as well. So instead of having to do it through the CLI, we can do it now through the TMC UI. This might be blurring the lines of, well, who owns what and who can do sort of role mixtures, but it does give you that opportunity to figure out if I'm a vSphere admin and I'm becoming a Kubernetes operator and I need to manage everything, well, I can do it now from this one interface. If I'm still a Kubernetes operator and all I care about is creating clusters, and you give me a namespace, or you give me some resources, well, I can go ahead and create them on my own, but they can still be visually managed and viewed through Tanzu Mission Control as well. And we know that we're not going to be the only game in town. You are going to either be looking at other platforms. You might have different business units that have standardized on Rancher or OpenShift, or maybe you're migrating from one to the other. You still want to have some sort of management or some kind of control or visibility into all this. And that is still where we get the opportunity to attach any sort of Kubernetes cluster into Tanzu Mission Control. And when I say any sort, it can't be like any. There has to be at least somewhat Kubernetes conformant. Like OpenShift is not a Kubernetes conformant type of Kubernetes deployment, but we have created the ability to actually attach an OpenShift type of cluster to. And there's some UI stuff, but I'm not going to bore you with that because we're actually going to look at the UI here in a second. One of the last slides here, again, is to think of how we take our clusters and what can we do with them. Once we inherit a cluster or we bring it in, we attach it, provision it, management, whatever you want to call it, we have to be able to cluster it together or give it some sort of backing. Is this running in a certain type of environment, a certain type of infrastructure? Is this dev prod staging? It's really up to you to define how do you categorize these clusters. And once they're categorized, that's when you can actually set policies to the entire category and have it go to every single cluster in that category. You also have this idea of workspaces where you could have common namespaces between different Kubernetes clusters and then apply policies based on that as well. So if you're running an AKS, vSphere, GKE, and wherever, and you have a certain application, we'll just call it Tanzu. I mean, just throw a name out there, and you create the Tanzu namespace in each one of those. You can apply the same policy to every single one of those namespaces with one click of a button. So it's very powerful in regards of having a single UI and single management plane for that as well. And then when you get down into the per cluster basis is when you can do conformant inspections, you can do data protection. There's also other integrations with Tanzu observability where you get even deeper resource utilization and monitoring through applications that are running inside of that cluster, as well as Tanzu service mesh. So, of course, utilizing the service mesh capabilities that can be built into there as well. And we also have audit logs and eventing and everything like that too. The other thing is to kind of know about licensing, like what do you get with all this? Today, we're going to be looking at pretty much everything is coming with advanced on the right side. I don't have any restrictions in my environment, so that's why we're going to see everything in there. But if you are purchasing Tanzu Standard, you get the standard version of Tanzu Mission Control, and these are the types of capabilities that are built into it. And so really the only thing that you're going to be missing is in the policy management side of things. So we'll see today, you'll have the ability to set security and access policies. But beyond that, anything with quota or networking or container registry policies, that won't be available to you as a part of it. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll dive into a little demo here. I'm going to share another screen. Chrome tab, that's what I'm looking for here. Tanzu Mission Control. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. I'm going to go ahead and clear that calendar invite. So this is the Tanzu Mission Control interface. This is the first thing you see once you get inside of here. Today, you can see there we have a bunch of clusters. We can see they have them spread across a bunch of different environments. So I've got things that are running inside of vSphere. I've got Azure. I've got OpenShift, Google Cloud, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different environments that I have available to me. So one of the things that we end up doing as soon as we deploy either vSphere or Tanzu, or we create a TKG management cluster, what you want to do is come over to administration, and then you go to management clusters. This is your ability, and as you can see, I've got some of these offline already. So I have some work to do once we get out of here. But this is my ability to then register the management cluster to it. This is going to give me the ability to actually then provision and do lifecycle management of these Kubernetes clusters. So I've got one of the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid management clusters that are running inside of AWS. I've got another one in Azure, and I've got a few that are just connected across a few different environments running vSphere or Tanzu, but I also have this one in Salt Lake running vSphere or Tanzu as well. And it's pretty simple to be able to do. I would just go here and I'd say register Kubernetes Grid management cluster, and I'm going to be given a URL. I take that URL, I slap it into the management cluster, and I go ahead and let it register. Now, after it registers, just to give you an idea of what it does look like, I'll go to my Azure instance. It's going to start. Applying a bunch of TMC agents and extensions. And what this is going to do is it's going to start looking at making sure the cluster is healthy. It's going to start looking at resources and everything like that. So we can see what's provisioned in there. As I start creating clusters, you will also see the ability to have, I can see all my workload clusters that are available to me. In this instance, I've already have this one that's already managed as a part of this, and we'll get to that here in a second. Now, after I have my management cluster set up, I want to make sure that I have a home form, right? I want to make sure I have the ability to put these into types of groups. And that's what I had mentioned before. And the name of the group is really dependent on whatever you want. Do you want to create a cluster group based on the infrastructure? Is it all in AWS? Is it a certain type of server? Is it a certain type of application? Is it business unit? Is it dev prod staging, as you see here? It's really up to you on how you want to take all your Kubernetes clusters and define them into groups. So,
hey, Kenny, on that topic, yeah. I assume that these groups aren't mutually exclusive, because you can want to apply policies at different levels, right? So it's like some things may only apply to a handful, and others will be more global. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, and you can create a policy and apply it to multiple groups as well. This is your ability to have that sort of one button experience to say, like, I don't want to manage all of the clusters individually. Instead, I know that all these clusters that belong to, we'll say there's development groups making some rad machine intense algorithm kind of application, but they need a particular policy applied to all their Kubernetes clusters. I create a cluster group, and then I apply that policy once, and any cluster that is then added to that group automatically gets those policies applied to it. So it's just an easier way to be able to manage it from that perspective.
And then you can also have like distributed management, right? Because you said you might have some teams that are direct access to creating their pods, but then you want some other team to sort of look after bunches of these things, right? So it just kind of lets you organize around this as well, right?
For sure.
And I'm assuming you can determine which users have certain permissions. So for example, if some users you only want to allow them to view the clusters, and others you'd allow them to provision or delete clusters, is that something that you can do within the platform as well?
Don't steal my thunder yet, okay, Lauren? We'll get there.
All right, I'll let you get to it.
But yes, you do have the ability, at least from Tanzu Mission Control, to set role-based access control about who has different types of accounts, who has access. So you can go through here and say who has access, what kind of policies can we apply to them, and so on and so forth. So yeah, you do have that, but we'll get to that part when we want to apply it to actual individual Kubernetes clusters here in a minute too.
Sounds good.
So just going into the cluster group, just so you can get an idea, like these are all the clusters that have been applied to the development cluster group, and you can see that they're spread across different providers, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So once we have our cluster group created, then what we can do is we want to go to our policies. And this is kind of really where all the magic happens inside of here. So we can see that we have different types of policies associated with it. So we have access policies, image, network security, quota, and custom policies. So to give you an idea of what, say, this particular access policy looks like, there's a guy that's on my team. His name's Keith Lee. So you can see I'm in Keith Lee's environment here. Maybe that's why all the vSphere components aren't up and running. But what we're doing is we're creating role bindings at this point, meaning that if we want to apply this particular access policy, we can see that if we're going to create anything that's an organization.admin, they're going to be given an org owner and team C admin and a platform ops role. And what we do that is then it's being applied to wherever we want to here. So we come here to the development side and we can see that we have a few different more access policies here. So there's Keith's, and then we also have the cluster group admin policy. So this is our ability to go through here and we can create different types of role bindings. So you can see whether you give a user access to create permission to create namespaces, whether they can access or read clusters, whether they can edit or manage them. You can be able to do that as well. And you can specify the user or the group, and whether it's the user that's based in the cluster, or if you have OIDC set up, you'll be able to set it up through there as well. And you can actually set and say whether it's OIDC or LDAP, you can make sure it's set across that as well. So whoever is being able to do that, whenever this cluster is added to the development organization here inside or organizational cluster group, it will be automatically applied with this direct access policy. And from there, anybody that has that particular LDAP or OIDC group, it'll be applied and they'll have whatever access that you want to be able to give them. So that's just the access policy side of things. Now, the other side is, I just said clusters. Well, what about this whole workspaces thing? This is, again, if you had a particular namespace that was uniform across multiple Kubernetes clusters. And so we can see that we've got the Pet Clinic app, we've got another one called Acme Fitness. And so these are namespaces that are uniform across some of the Kubernetes clusters. And we can go ahead and we can apply policies to them. So each one of these have either cluster or workspace policies that can be applied to them. On the image registry side, if you had a Harbor instance that you had running and you want to make sure that people have access to it, you go ahead and create your image registry policy there. There's network policies to make sure that if you want to make sure you have any sort of firewall or fencing or any types of ports open or anything like that, any kind of CNI aspects that you want to have applied, it can be done through there. The security aspect, this is another one that is included with Tanzu Standard. And again, this is your ability to set things on how pods can run with inside of here. So most of the time, you want to make sure you don't have, like this one's right here, privileged containers. You don't have privileged containers running inside of any of these clusters. And so you set that up inside of here. There's also a baseline template that's created. You can come through here and you can go and turn some of these on, turn these off. So we can see that we've disabled policy enforcement. We've disabled native pod security policies as well. And so that's been applied to this particular development cluster group too. Quotas, of course, we don't want people to go crazy and start taking up all of our resources. So if we want quota management, this is your ability to be able to apply that to here as well. And then if this is all, just also mention that this is all built on top of Open Policy Agent, or OPA, that's available as part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation out there on GitHub. So if you wanted to create your own custom policy, you could do that too. It's just whatever is built as a part of OPA can then be inherited and brought into here as well. So that's the policy side of things. So really being powerful and having that sort of one-click button experience into all of the cluster management. Now, when we look at the monitoring side of things, I'm going to go to a healthy cluster here because there's no point in looking at a dead one. But just to give you an idea, let's find this one right here. So my TKG on Azure. So once I manage a cluster through Tanzu Mission Control, it will go and start adding in all of the TMC extensions and basically agents or services that will then feed up telemetry data into Tanzu Mission Control. And not just telemetry, but it's also health diagnostic data and everything like that. So we can actually see the health not only of the services that are running, but as well as resource consumption, what's being taken. We can get a little bit more inspection into our cluster. We can go to the nodes. We can see exactly how many control planes are there. What does the control plane look like? Is it healthy? Is there any services down? What's the CPU utilization that's coming out of it? We can see that what agents are running on it from Tanzu Mission Control. Let's see if we can find one that's running an application here. I'll see if I can find maybe GKE prod. We'll see if that's running anything. So we'll go to one of the workers here, and we can see, oh, there's really nothing running on here either. But you kind of get the idea of what we can see inside there. We can go to the namespaces to see what's been provisioned. And then we can see the workloads as well. So this gives us the ability to kind of see any of the applications that are running inside of this particular node too. And if I wanted to get even a deeper look into it, there's really no good applications that are running, but I'll just kind of give you an idea. So if we just go to the metrics agent, this gives you an idea of the YAML that's running. So again, you just get a little bit more of a visibility into this as well. Now, the other thing that I had mentioned too is that you have the ability to run different types of inspections on here. So if you want to run an inspection to be able to look at conformance, and conformance means that it still adheres to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's idea or terminology of this is what a Kubernetes cluster should look like, meaning that it is conformant to upstream. And the reason why we want conformance in a Kubernetes cluster is because it will be more capable of running any type of Kubernetes application that you do want to deploy on it. It has not been, should I say, it's not been edited or changed in some way that we wouldn't expect a off-the-shelf Kubernetes pod or application to run. You also have the ability to run CIS benchmarks. This is only available as a part of advanced, and that is seeing if that is running against all of the security best practices that are defined by the CIS Kubernetes benchmark. So we have those inspections. I hear, is there a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask, I mean, I think that's great that it connects with the CIS benchmarks. Is there any customizations that you're able to see kind of with either with a security or compliance, any custom regulations that you have that you need to adhere to? Is there any way to check against those as well?
Not yet. I know you're thinking of like SOX or HIPAA or anything like that. No, there's no other kind of benchmarks that we're able to import or be able to scan against today. Mm-hmm. That needs to be built out more in the framework and the scanning engine. But what we're doing today is we are taking the off-the-shelf CIS benchmark, which is available out there. You can go and you can Google it and you can find it. And all those best practices, and we are running it against the current cluster, and you'll be giving back like a grade or report card on what this cluster looks like.
Very cool.
And then the other thing is I've already enabled data protection on this cluster. All you do is you just click a button that says enable data protection. And what that's going to do is it will install some more agents onto your cluster. And then from there, I can go ahead and I can create a backup. The backup allows me to do a few different things. I can choose the entire cluster. I can just base it on selected namespaces, because let's be real, all I care about is maybe a certain type of application that's running. If you've got them all running in default, that's great. Or if I got them running in somewhere else, I can do that too. Or I can use it based off a particular label. So if I had an application that runs in multiple namespaces, but they have different types of labels, or I've got anything else, any kind of resource that has a label, I can choose it through there as well. And it'll back up the configuration. Again, the reason why we have backup is because we are running persistent applications in these clusters. And I have to be able to specify, well, where are these backups going to go, or where they're going to happen? So what we've done is we've integrated everything, and it's all based off of S3. So whether you have an S3 bucket at Amazon, or whether you're running your own local MinIO S3 instance, you can set that up now as well. So you take your own local MinIO S3 instance, you plug that into, actually it's here on the administration side, you create some account credentials, and you go ahead and you start setting that up. So once I have, let me go back to my cluster group here. I got ahead of myself trying to show you all everything that's happening inside here. So once I have that, and I specify the backup location, and then I specify, this again, it's just like cron. I set up when I want to back up, how often I want to back up, and how many of these backups do I want to keep. Name and create it, off and running, simple as that. So that's how we kind of have that as well. If I have integrations, or I've purchased, or I have licensing for Tanzu Observability or Tanzu Service Mesh, I can go ahead and I can add these integrations in here as well. And it will install all the components for Service Mesh, or it will install everything needed to connect to Tanzu Observability too. Lastly, the last thing to kind of look with as well is just events and audit logging. So being able to just come here and see exactly who ran what at one time. So we can see that there's some policy health checks that ran. And then if I want to get some sort of audit logs, I can go ahead and pull those out. So we can even get a deeper look into who did what and when. But that's it for kind of looking through Tanzu Mission Control. As you can see, this is just a good opportunity to have what we call fleet-wide management of all your Kubernetes clusters that are running in any type of environment.
Yeah, it's awesome. We were chatting before we jumped on, right, around sort of the simplicity of this, and sort of not, there's what it does is in essence pretty simple, but it's a super need out there, right? I mean, it's like you've got lots of teams spinning these up, and when you want to think about how do you apply policies and have some sort of more global view of it, this has been a real challenge for organizations, right? When they're running Kubernetes. So
yeah, it sure is. I mean, it's one of those things that we've looked at from time and time again. It was hard to get Kubernetes stood up. I mean, that was the first thing, and that's where KubeADM was built, and where Cluster API was built on top of there. And now we've taken those open source projects and rolled them into Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. So we have it from an individual cluster level. Now, how do we take it above there? I mean, it as being an old vSphere admin person here as well, it just started off the days of, okay, we're going to install ESX or ESXi on one host. We're going to run a few virtual machines. Okay, we figured out how to do that. Now, how do we do it across 20 different hosts and 400 virtual machines, and how do we visualize that? And that's sort of where vCenter comes in. So kind of think of like vCenter and Tanzu Mission Controls being somewhat similar in regards of, I guess you say, that kind of analogy of having a big overview of all of your either Kubernetes clusters, and then of course with vSphere, all your virtual machines and hosts and everything like that.
Yep, it's definitely a different challenge to go from, hey, a team that's spinning up Kubernetes for their own use, and sort of like, just starting to, having, big whopping, applications in production that sort of have to, can't fail, right? So you sort of have to progress to a different level of how to manage that, right?
For sure.
Hey, very cool, Kenny. It's a really cool demo. Thank you so much for showing it to us in Mission Control. Any parting thoughts before we move to our wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to learn more, make sure you go to the hands-on labs. So, just Google VMware hands-on labs. It's free and accessible to anybody. There is a Tanzu Mission Control HOL that you can do and kind of just get some playtime with it and kind of figure out what the heck's going on here. And if you ever want to learn more, I guess reach out to your VMware sales rep and kind of have them give you a little bit more of a rundown on what's happening here. But yeah, thank you again for having me on. And who knows, if I keep doing this, maybe you're going to ask me to come back for a third time too.
I'm sure we will.
Absolutely.
Hey, Lauren, thoughts on before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think it was a great overview in discussing with our theme of management and operations for this month. It's a great way to kick it off. And to your point on some of those resources, we'll be adding them and direct links to the description on YouTube. So if you want to check those out as well later, and for viewers on demand, we'll be posting those there. So yeah, make it easy for you. But thanks again. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you in the future.
Hey, big shout out to all the sysadmins out there. It's sysadmin month. That's why we're running a lot of management this month, basically to focus in on, the sysadmins and particularly our community of virtual administrators that are out there as well. And then finally, if you like what you're seeing on this channel, please subscribe to the VMware Cloud channels, whatever platform you're watching this from, because we've actually now extended to other ones. And with that, I just want to say thanks again to everybody, and we'll see you soon on the next on our next live stream.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.